year 1955 saw Winston Churchill resign as Britain's Prime Minister, entertaining his monarch to a farewell dinner at number 10 Downing Street. He left a country still withdrawing from its imperial past, with trouble flaring in Cyprus as Greek Cypriot demonstrators demanded union with Greece. France, too, faced colonial problems, with massive riots breaking out in the cities of Algeria to demand independence. In contrast, the United States seemed to be enjoying a period of prosperity and stability. The economy boomed, and leisure and tourism became major new industries, with attractions such as Disneyland opening in California to delight this new mass market. Florida, where the second Disneyland, known as Disney World, would later be built, was also booming as a tourist resort, taking full advantage of its sun and sea. Big business had moved in to provide every attraction for vacationers, and fortunes were being made, not always in the most straightforward of ways. On the morning of the 15th of June, 1955, the police were called to a beachside summer home at Manalapan, near Palm Beach in Florida. Workmen told Sheriff John Kirk that they had arrived by appointment at about 8:30 to repair a broken window. They had often done work before for the owners, Judge Eugene Chillingworth and his wife Marjorie, and were surprised that they were not in, since the judge was a stickler for punctuality. The Chillingworths' car was still in the garage, and the table was laid for breakfast. Assuming that the judge and his wife would be back soon, the men decided to go down to the beach for a swim. But what they found made them call the police. The doors onto the porch were open, and the outside light had been smashed. Dry red drops spattered down the steps to the beach. And along the pathway leading to the sea were footsteps going to and from the house, together with more drops of what seemed to be blood. The 66-year-old Chillingworth was senior judge of the 15th Judicial District of Florida. Caustic and austere, he had been on the bench for more than 30 years and was well known for his utter integrity. His wife Marjorie was a few years younger, and they had 3 grown-up daughters. The police cordoned off the house and began a search. By nightfall, there was still no sign of the Chillingworths. The front door of the house had been locked, and the car's engine was cold. The beds had been slept in, but there was no sign of a struggle in the house. The Chillingworths had been seen the previous evening in Palm Beach by their daughters and had set off for the beach house at about 9 o'clock. By the evening, the drops on the steps had been analyzed as blood of Mrs. Chillingworth's group. It seemed evident that some sort of violence had taken place, and that the Chillingworths had been forcibly abducted. No further clues were found, but Sheriff Kirk was at pains to emphasize the scale of the search.
Sheriff, could you tell me approximately how many men are participating in the search for the missing people? and there's probably 100 out tonight.
Does that represent law enforcement officers from what branches?
From all over, they're all here. There's Palm Beach Police, West Palm Beach, Lake Worth, Delray, some Coast Guardmen, and the Sheriff's Department.
Despite the offer of a reward, detailed searches of the coastline and some over-optimistic reports that a breakthrough was near, the Chillingworths were never found. Their disappearance remained a mystery, and their names were put on the missing persons file. Within 3 weeks of the disappearance, State Attorney Philip O'Connell of Palm Beach received a mysterious telephone call. "You're the next to go," said a man's voice. As the months went by without any sign of the Chillingworths, O'Connell tried to work out who in Palm Beach might particularly have wanted the judge to disappear. One figure kept coming to mind, an ambitious young lawyer named Joseph Peel. Peel was now, at 31, the single municipal judge of West Palm Beach. He and his wife Imogen lived well, with a large house and 2 cars, an air-conditioned Cadillac and a Lincoln Continental, all on a salary of only $3,000 a year. There were rumors that Judge Peel was not always totally scrupulous about where the money to keep up his lifestyle came from. Peel had fallen out with Chillingworth in June 1953, when the senior judge had presided at a disciplinary hearing and gave Peel a public reprimand. In May 1955, Peel was again accused of professional misconduct, and Chillingworth had been heard to remark that if the junior judge appeared before him once more, he would break him so that he never practiced again. After Chillingworth's disappearance, Peel appeared before another judge and was disbarred for 90 days. By early 1957, he was doing little legal work, but still living well. Then came a bombshell. Judge Peel was arrested as an accessory in an assault case. Along with a small-time crook, Floyd Holzapfel, nicknamed Lucky, and an insurance agent, James Yenser, he was accused of conspiring to kill a young lawyer on whom he had taken out a life insurance policy with a double indemnity clause for death by violence. Peel was said to have lured the man to a bar where Holzapfel attacked him. But in court, Holzapfel was able to persuade the jury that he had been enraged by insulting remarks the young man made about his wife. He was found not guilty, and the case against his associates dropped. Nevertheless, Peel was now permanently disbarred and went into business. One project was a fraudulent construction company in which Floyd Holzapfel was a partner. Holzapfel was known to have had a string of convictions, among them for armed robbery. There were strong rumors that he and Peel had long been associated with a local racketeer named Bobby Lincoln, who controlled lucrative gambling operations in Palm Beach. In the mid-1950s, gambling was still illegal in most US states, but widely available. In the major cities, it was tightly controlled by the local gangs and was a major source of their income, along with drugs, prostitution, and protection. Bobby Lincoln's racket was Bolita, an on-street numbers game. As the local judge, Peel could give advance warning of police raids on Lincoln's men, since he had to sign all search warrants and help to get them off when charged. By 1955, Peel was taking up to $3,000 a week for this legal protection. State Attorney O'Connell's suspicions began to be confirmed in November 1958, when the body of a young gangster was discovered dumped with weights tied to him in a creek near Palm Beach. Sheriff John Kirk asked the Florida Sheriff's Bureau for help, and an agent, Henry Loven, was sent. Lovern soon found Floyd Holzapfel featuring as one of his suspects. In the course of his investigation, he had a secret meeting with Jim Yenser, the insurance agent who had now fallen out with Holzapfel. Lovern was amazed to hear Yenser say that he had heard rumors that both Holzapfel and Peel might be involved in the disappearance of the Chillingworths. Yenser offered to act as an undercover agent for the state and got permission to join Holzapfel in some crime so as to gain his confidence. A few weeks later, Yenser tipped off the police that Holzapfel was planning to hijack a load of weapons destined for rebels in Nicaragua. The police foiled the attempt and captured Holzapfel red-handed, with an impressive armory of rifles and machine guns. In the confusion, Yenser was able to get away without arousing the suspicion of his confederates. Holzapfel, too, managed to get out of prison on bail, having raised $1,500 from a bail bondsman named P.O. Wilbur. In February 1959, Floyd Holzapfel was sent for trial. Despite his relaxed appearance, there was little that could be said in his defense, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Nevertheless, he managed to persuade the court to release him on bail again, pending an appeal. Bail bondsman Wilbur now regretted his generosity when Holzapfel fled to Rio de Janeiro. It was suspected that Judge Peel had encouraged him to go. Certainly, Holzapfel soon began demanding that Peel pay him his share in their construction company. Peel refused to do so, and then contacted Yenser to suggest that Holzapfel should be got rid of. The police now told Yenser to contact Holzapfel in Rio and tell him that the construction company was making massive profits, but that Peel was trying to cut him out. He suggested that Holzapfel should return to confront Peel. On the 30th of September 1960, Peel called Yenser to say that Holzapfel was back in Florida. The police were able to record him telling Yenser to execute the contract immediately. Yenser then met up with Holzapfel at an hotel. In the course of a 3-day drinking binge, which was also recorded by the police, Holzapfel let slip that he had been involved with Peel in the murder of Judge Chillingworth and his wife. On the 3rd of October 1960, Holzapfel was again arrested. That night he tried unsuccessfully to commit suicide by slashing his wrists. The authorities were now able to act on the information that Holzapfel had given them, and Judge Peel and another business associate, Donald Miles, were arrested and charged with conspiracy to murder Holzapfel. Philip O'Connell was initially anxious to play down the Chillingworth connection.
With the assistance of the Sheriff's Office in Brevard County, Joseph Peel and Don Miles were arrested and charged with conspiracy to murder.
There has been quite a bit of speculation in the local press as to a connection between this and the Judge Chillingworth case. What could you say about that?
I have absolutely no comment to make on that, because our investigation continues at all times, and I feel it would be wrong to even deny or admit or even speculate that anything at this time has reference to any other case.
This time it was Peel who managed to persuade the court to release him on $25,000 bail. Like Holzapfel, he promptly disappeared. But now, Bobby Lincoln, who was in prison, had heard that his former associates had been arrested. He suddenly announced that he too could help on the Chillingworth case and offered to turn state's evidence in return for immunity from prosecution. O'Connell agreed and obtained a full confession from Lincoln that he and Holzapfel had been hired by Peel to murder the Chillingworths. Peel was traced to Chattanooga, arrested, and charged with Holzapfel with the 5-year-old murder. The trial of Judge Peel began on the 7th of March 1961 in the St. Lucie County Courthouse at Fort Pierce, Florida. His attorney had argued that he would not receive a fair trial in Palm Beach. Philip O'Connell led for the prosecution with Eugene Spellman as his assistant. Carlton Welsh, an attorney from Jacksonville, led Peel's defense. In the 5 months since his arrest, Holzapfel had also been persuaded to make a full confession and to plead guilty to the first-degree murder of the Chillingworths. He arrived to tell the court how he and Peel had set up their protection racket with Bobby Lincoln. Holzapfel went on to describe how Peel had told him that Chillingworth was threatening to disbar him, thus ruining both his career and their lucrative racket. Peel had insisted that Holzapfel must kill Chillingworth, and Holzapfel had involved Bobby Lincoln. They decided to make the judge disappear by dumping his body in the ocean. So, on the 13th of June, 1955, a small fishing boat was bought, together with 2 Army surplus diving belts and lead weights. On the evening of the 14th, Holzapfel and Lincoln left the dock at Riviera Beach and set off along the coast to the Chillingworths' beach house. At midnight, they landed and went up to the house. When Judge Chillingworth answered their knock, Holzapfel pulled out a pistol. As they pushed into the house, Lincoln smashed the porch light. They then began to bind and gag the judge and his wife. Once this was done, the Chillingworths were forced out onto the porch and down the steps. Here, Mrs. Chillingworth managed to work her gag loose and scream. Holzapfel struck her with his pistol, making her head bleed badly. She was then forced across the beach and into the boat with her husband. About 2 miles out, the engine was cut. A weight belt was put around Marjorie Chillingworth's waist. She was pushed overboard and sank. Holzapfel and Bobby Lincoln, who went into the witness box a few days later, disagreed as to whether the judge was pushed over with a weighted belt or managed to throw himself over because his feet had not been properly tied. Whichever it was, the judge started trying to swim. Holzapfel hit at him with a shotgun. Finally, they managed to tie an anchor to him, and he sank. The 2 killers took the boat back to the harbor. The bodies were never recovered. Despite defense attempts to portray him as a man who hated Judge Peel and would do anything to blacken his name, Holzapfel came across as a credible witness as he poured out his confession. This was backed up in all material facts by Bobby Lincoln. He added the pitiful detail that just before his wife was thrown overboard, Judge Chillingworth had shouted out, "Honey, remember that I love you." Once again, the jury heard the defense fail to shake one of the confessions on which the prosecution case depended. Next, Yenser was called to confirm that Peel had attempted to persuade him to kill Holzapfel. Then came a sensation, for the prosecution were able to show that Judge Peel had not given up trying to get rid of the prosecution's main witness. Philip O'Connell was able to produce various prisoners to testify that Peel had attempted to have Holzapfel poisoned while on remand in prison.
We'd like to say that now we have uncovered the poisoning effort. We have found that a sufficient cyanide was on a cigarette package which was delivered to a trustee in the jail with the express purpose of having it sent up to Floyd Holzapfel.
Judge Peel appeared as the main witness in his defense. His wife had never wavered in her support for him, but many others had been impressed by the unanimity of the 2 confessions against her husband and the witnesses testifying to the other murder attempts he had made. Despite these, Peel denied everything. He claimed never to have been an associate of either Holzapfel or Lincoln, and he had certainly never persuaded or hired them to kill the Chillingworths. Peel spent a full day in the witness box, using his considerable charm on the jury. The defense then worked hard to convince the court and the public who crowded in that Peel must be innocent, since there was no body, and the only evidence against him was the confessions of 2 known criminals. But his denials carried little weight. On the 17th day of the trial, the jury withdrew. They were back in only 2 hours, and unanimously found Joseph Peel guilty of being an accessory before the fact in the murder of Judge Chillingworth and his wife. They recommended mercy, and Peel received a life sentence. But it later emerged that this had been a lucky escape, for the jury had initially split evenly over whether to recommend the electric chair. As Peel was taken away, his lawyer, Carlton Welsh, seemed somewhat unclear as to what exactly he had been fighting for.
Mr. Welsh, if you had it to do over again, would you change the defense of your client at all?
Well, in the sense that you put it, I didn't really have a client as a lawyer has a client. I was down here attempting to defend, as I thought, the principles that I believe in, that I think every American should believe in.
These appeared to be that everyone has the right to be tried by the jury, and not by public opinion or the press.
The principle that the jury stands between the individual, the rights of the individual, and the state.
Shortly afterwards, Floyd Holzapfel was taken back to court for sentencing. To general amazement, since he had pleaded guilty and helped in the case against Judge Peel, he was sentenced to die in the electric chair. Holzapfel appealed, and his sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment. He died in prison. One prison officer who came to know and like him gave him this epitaph: "At least he did something decent in his life. He brought Joe Peel to justice. I guess that made him a big shot at last." Judge Peel himself never admitted for a moment that he had done anything wrong. From prison, he continued to look for ways of proving his innocence.
Mr. Peel, are there any other major developments in this case?
Yes, there are. One very interesting matter is that we know now that on a retrial we can show positively that Bobby Lincoln was not aboard the boat that night as he testified, and as Holzapfel has testified, and we can show that he was on land and directed that boat to shore.
Not surprisingly, Bobby Lincoln stood by his testimony. But Peel had other surprises in store.
On the day that the jury retired in my case for their verdict, Mrs. Greggs' attorney approached Mr. Welsh and myself and Mr. Rogers and informed us that he had a client who had averred to him that she had in fact seen Judge Chillingworth during the month of September of 1955.
Once again, the witness failed to substantiate the claim, and the bodies of Judge Chillingworth and his wife remained undiscovered. For his part in their murder, Joseph Peel spent more than 20 years in prison. When he was finally released in 1982, he was suffering from terminal cancer.